رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. ربنا زدنا علما وارزقنا فهما. اللهم ارحمنا، ارحم والدينا، ارحم أولادنا، ارحم أقربائنا، ارحم أصدقائنا، وارحم أساتذتنا، واشف مرضانا، وارحم موتانا، وارحم أمة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم افتح لنا بالخير واختم لنا بالخير واجعل عواقب أمورنا بالخير. يدك الخير إنك على كل شيء قدير. وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلق ونور عرش محمد مصطفى صلى الله عليه وسلم وأصحابه أجمعين. وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم. Shukran to Imam Hussein for the opening dua and welcome to everyone. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open all our hearts, our minds, our tongues so that we can benefit from the session, inshallah. The request was that we should just quickly recap what we did last week. Now, last week we were dealing with a question about dua can change the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, on the face of things, one would say if the dua is something that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and it has been decreed, how can something that results from creation, a human being making dua, change that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed? Now, on the surface of things, if we just interpret this, that's my phone that's going off here, so please forgive me. If we interpret that very rigidly, then we will see that it's difficult to understand. How can we do something that changes what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed? Now, to make it easier for us, we said that the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has two aspects to it. The will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A reminder that nothing whatsoever can happen in creation if it is not the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter what we are talking about. If it is the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then nothing can change that. Now, the scholars who have studied this topic of Tawhid and how we should understand the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the Quran, they've extracted that there are actually two meanings or understandings that we can apply when we speak about the will or the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first one, they said, is the question of what they refer to as the universal will, which is recorded in the Lawhil Mahfuz, the preserved tablet. Now, anything that's in the preserved tablet would be something that's totally unchangeable. Nothing can change that. That has been decreed, and that is within Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's all-encompassing knowledge of what is going to happen in creation. And the second part of it, of how they say Allah speaks about Allah's will, is what they refer to as the legislative will. That which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs us to do and warns us about and prohibits us to do. Allah says there that that is what Allah would like us to do and this is what we should stay away from. And then also spells out the benefit and the consequences of both, either good or bad, that we do. Now they say the legislative will which spells out the component that deals with our actions. That legislative will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah himself says that Allah will respond to our du'as, our pleas, our requests. Allah promises that in the Quran. It's not maybe or what. And without going into all of that, so our actions can in fact change the decree insofar as the legislative will is concerned. So if you sin, you're going to get punished. That's part of the universal decree in the way that Allah constructed the universe. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says further on in the Quran that ask me, I can forgive you, I can respond to your request, and all of those things. So we should see that our actions and our behavior can impact on the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds to our request, there's a hadith that spells out how we can, or how Allah does that. Allah can respond in one of three ways: either immediate fulfillment, which could at times be delayed, and we're not going to go into all of that, but it is fulfilled. You ask, and Allah responds almost immediately or immediately. The second one is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds to your request by not necessarily giving what you are asking, but turns away hardships and calamities and crises from befalling you as a response to what you have requested. And the third one is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala postpones the response to your dua or your request by keeping it as a reward for you in Jannah. And those are basically the three ways how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can respond to our requests. And how Allah responds is entirely up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think the only thing that we must maybe add to what we said last week was we should not think that our du'as, or even the dua of any human being, whether it is a very pious person or your murshid, your sheikh, or whether it is one of the awliya, that the power of that dua is not built in the dua itself. The power comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The dua itself doesn't have power. What did we say previously as one of the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all powerful, which means that power ultimately resides with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and no one else, and nothing ever in creation has power. Ultimate power is with Allah, so don't assign power to the dua itself. That would be a grave response. And I'm going to basically leave it there and maybe just ask quickly if there's anything that people would like me to just clarify that we dealt with last week before we go on to the topic of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created good and bad. And welcome Muhammad Fasih. Shukran for joining us.
Walaikum salam to Salie and walaikum salam to everyone in the group. Alhamdulillah.
Okay. All right. Can we hear if there's anything that anyone would like me to clarify or respond to before we move on to our next topic of today?
No, Salie, you can go on with.
Okay, inshallah. We will move on. Now, the topic that we said that we're going to start with today, it depends how we approach it. Might be seen as a very simple topic, something that's easily understood. but there are some pitfalls in it, and we must be clear about how we understand this. Now, before I actually make the input comment, I would like to know how we understand this, because we know we must believe in this, that Allah created the good and the bad. Now, if we say Allah created the good and the bad, logically, and from people who are not necessarily believers, they would find the concept of the creator of this entire universe being the creator of bad and evil and things that's displeasing. The good we can easily understand. That is associated with a supreme being. But how do we understand that Allah created the bad as well? And I want to throw the floor open and want to hear what the comments are now. Bismillah.
But Salie, if I might just say, certainly if we talk about Allah creating the good and the bad, then my understanding of that is that because Allah created everything, absolutely everything, then to say that something bad that exists, but it's not from Allah, is to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not subhanallah of that. And ultimately Allah created.
Muhammad Fasih has broken up there. Are you still with us, Muhammad Fasih?
I apologize for that. Something just happened now with my connection.
It's fine. It's fine.
But I think basically my question is, the statement that I'm making and trying to understand is, when mankind blames Allah mankind sometimes, when something bad befalls them, they blame Allah, or they say, how can? And some people have lost their faith, saying, how can there be a God when there's bad things in the dunya, in a sense? But they're understanding the reality that Allah created both good and bad as a means to test us. So therefore we understand it from the point of view that Allah created good and bad, but Allah left us with our intentions and our desires of what we choose to follow.
Okay. Any other comments?
Yes, Mr. Salie, if I may.
Yes.
If we say that, hypothetically speaking, that bad doesn't come from Allah, then it means that this bad, or the concept of bad, has its own power and its own ability, which is outside the realm of what Allah is or we're in control of. So that is why my understanding is that it must come from Allah, because He is the source of everything. So it forms within that realm of His power and His dominion.
Okay. Any other comment?
Yes, Mr. Salie, if we look at the names of Allah, the names, Allah is Al-Hadi, the one who guides, and is also the Mudil, the one that leads astray, or the one that misguides. That is also one of His names. So it's both that comes from Him.
Now, okay, how do we then understand? And is it right to say the good comes from us, the good comes from Allah, and the bad comes from us? How do we understand that?
We say that because out of...
Imam Hussein, let's give one of the women a chance to answer. We've heard it, that people say the good comes from Allah and the bad comes from us. Have we heard that? Is it wrong to say that? Have we not heard that people at the level of Islam, when you speak to ordinary people who are at the level of the Sharia, where they say that the bad comes from us and the good comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have we heard that? I'm sure we've heard that.
Yes.
Is it wrong to say that?
I think it's got to do with the adab that we have with Allah. If we say and if we say that the bad comes from Allah with that type of mindset, then our nafs tends to say and play the blame game. Yes, it is you that caused this bad to happen to me. I had no choice in the matter.
But is it Allah that's doing the bad?
He's the source of it.
The
But
source
again,
of the bad.
Yes.
Okay, I've asked enough questions.
I think good and bad comes from Allah. Bad can only happen if Allah wills it to happen. We choose the bad, but it will only happen with Allah's will.
Alhamdulillah. I think we're getting close to it, but the fact that we can't respond yet in an easy, simple way with certainty shows that it's an area that requires attention, right? So what we'll do, we'll go on, and we will go on to the the one who is busy with the fan must put off the mic, please, because we can hear everything.
Okay.
I would like to start off by asking the question of why we have been created, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it.
Jellyfish. There's a leaf soak up the water.
Okay, is that more clear now? I forgot I can also do things here on my side. Why have we been created? I think we all kind of familiar with this one, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But what might appear to be very easy and obvious is in fact a very deep and difficult question which we can come to. Now, when we speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created human beings for no other purpose than to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we're all familiar with, because we've all asked that question, why am I here on this dunya? And this is the response that we've been given, and we've taken that. Now, worship can take the three forms: dhikr, remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala; tafakkur, contemplation; and thirdly, khidmah, to be in service of all creation. In fact, just covering the whole concept of worship alone would take at least a session or two on its own. And if time ever allows, we can come back to that point. So the Quran guides us and says to us why we've been created to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah also says further in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us to test us of who will be best in conduct. Now, if somebody is compelled to do something, then there is no choice in it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us with choice. Right at the beginning, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the entire universe, Allah offered this ability of choosing between right and wrong. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as it says in the Quran, to the heavens and the earth and the mountains. And they were too scared to take this on, because they were too scared that if they take this on, they might not be able to do what Allah has ordered them to do. And Allah said, if you do the bad, I'm going to punish you. But if you do the good, I'm going to reward you. So they said, no. We would rather not. But as human beings, we undertook this. We took on this amana, this trust. So we are absolutely unique when it comes to free will and choice. Of course, it's the question of the jinn, which we won't touch on now. But we've been given free will and choice. So in a sense, how we exercise and conduct our lives in this world is an expression of how we use our free will and our choice to determine what we are going to do and what we are not going to do. And then after all of this, on the day of judgment, we will stand in front of Allah, and what we will in fact be doing will be presenting our books of, in a sense, choices that we've made in our lives. Now, as difficult as it might seem to anyone, if you claim to be a Muslim, then one of the articles of faith is that you must accept that good and bad was created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's part of how Allah designed the universe with clearly defined differences between good and bad, based in broad terms, based on opposites. For example, the birth and death, good and bad, reward, punishment, Jannah, Jahannam. Those two things almost walk parallel to one another, and Allah designed the universe like this. It will be made up of these opposites, and we will stand with choice in between the two. Now, if we say that we are given here and we're going to be judged on how we exercised our choice, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only created good, or created us as human beings in the same way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Malaa'ikah. Malaa'ikah, it's totally impossible for them to do anything that is other than good. They can only do good because Allah has designed them like that. They act out of compulsion. They're forced to be what they've been created for. And that's to only be able to do good. Now, if Allah left it like that and Allah put us on the dunya, then we would only be doing good. So Allah created the opportunity for us to do bad as well if we choose to do so. So what is it that we must see when we talk about, when we say Allah created good and bad? It must be understood not in a broad way. It must be understood very specifically that Allah created the environment and the possibility of doing good or bad. Allah cannot be associated with bad in terms of committing bad. Be absolutely clear about that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can only be associated with goodness and fairness and everything that's associated with good. And in the same way, we can never associate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with anything that is bad. So bad, the possibility of doing the bad has been put and created such for every single person in creation. And we must remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with 7 billion people or more on this planet, one day I should actually sit down and try and work out a rough estimate. What is the average life expectancy of a human being? And from the beginning of time till the end of time, how many billions of people you would have? One can go through that exercise and say you are actually literally talking about billions of people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created up to now and will be creating in future. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so great, so unique in his ability, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not only knows every single thing about you as a person, as an individual, and every single person, Allah created special conditions and circumstances around that person to test the whole concept of good and bad. So you've been given, for example, a person has been given tremendous wealth, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him poor health. In another case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can give him the opposite of that. And in another case, it could be different. And every person's specific conditions and circumstances is known to the finest detail by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now Allah's given you choice. And Allah puts you within that environment that says, now you make your choice. But remember, Allah knows everything. You can't say this or that and think that you can fool Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah knows even what is in your mind, what is in your heart, even the intentions that you don't carry out. Allah knows about those things. And it applies to every person. So we're going to stand one day in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Judgment Day with our books in our hands on a one-to-one basis. It's going to be a personal one-to-one. And when we say one-to-one, please don't ever make the mistake. For those of us who went through the first part of Tawhid, when we say one-to-one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be referred to as a number, like one in a string of other numbers. One is part of the numeric system, and two is also, so Allah is not one in that sense. Allah is unique and cannot be referred to as one numerically. But when we say one-to-one, we must also remember we're not going to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like Allah is there and we are here. Then it means there's us and there's Allah. But we're not going to go into that now. Otherwise, we're going to get sidetracked. But the point to make is that every person's life is made up of very unique circumstances that's peculiar and applicable to that person. And Allah is entirely familiar with that. And you now have to exercise your choice in what decisions you are going to make. And at the end of the day, you will be expected to answer for whatever decisions you have made. Now, making the choice between good and bad, it's a choice. But before I go on, I want to ask this question. Allah has given us the ability now to do good or bad. Can we do bad? Are we able to do bad?
Yeah.
Was that Shabnam? Oh.
Assalamu alaikum, yes.
Wa alaikum salam.
Sure.
Yes, Shabnam. Answer. What
Yes,
is your
we
answer?
can do bad. We can do bad.
Okay. Is there anyone else? Is there anyone who says we can't do bad? Or then generally, if there's no answer, it means that we agree that we can do bad. We can never do bad. We can choose to do bad.
Not independently.
Yeah, this is the point that we've covered previously.
It's so difficult. It's so difficult to do good.
It's easier to do bad. Okay, but let's get to the point because it's a very subtle point. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one who can make things happen, who can create effect, who can do things. We can never do. We can choose. The choice belongs to us. Listen carefully to what I'm saying. the choice of wanting to do something bad belongs to us. The ability to execute it, where does that come from? Not from you, never. You will never ever be able to do anything, good or bad, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not will for you to do it. Now, doesn't that sound a bit like the Jabariyah? You remember let's remind one another what we said, how the Jabariyah believe, and we said they're out of the fold of Islam. They believe if it is not the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you can do nothing. And they were right. So how do we now understand the fact that we can choose to do the bad, but we can't execute the bad if it is not the will of Allah? How do you understand that? Let's hear. And if we're not clear what the question is or what I said before, then please feel free to ask me to go back to that point.
So where I understand it, we have a choice, and with your choice comes a consequence. So Allah executes it, but we will either be rewarded or punished for our choice.
Yes. Is there anyone who wish to add to that? I think it's such a good answer that it's probably not going to require further elaboration. The ability never resides with us to do anything, ever, ever. Not only when we're talking about good and bad, when we talk about anything whatsoever. Ability to do comes only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's entrench that in our belief. So when we talk about trying to get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we never take what doesn't belong to us. Because the moment we say we can do, you are setting up yourself as a partner to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're actually saying Allah can do and you can do, or you can do without Allah. So let's keep our aqidah pure, that we can never do. Now, the question would be, why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then not stop us? Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not stop us from doing the bad? That's a question.
I think there's two aspects to that, Mr. Salie. The one is through his pure knowledge of what's to come. He allows certain things to happen. So if, for example, through his mercy, he allows us to do something bad, but he knows that we are going to repent, so he allows the bad to happen. So that's one aspect of him allowing the bad to happen, knowing that we're going to return to him. The second one is, if Allah stops us from doing the bad, that means our choices, we didn't really have a choice, because then it's only him that's doing it.
Good answer, good answer. I think the point here is to understand that, go back to the first point, the introduction to the topic, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala offered us the opportunity to do either good or bad, and to take the consequences of what comes with either one of the choices that we make. Now, the design, the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the divine plan was to put us between right and wrong. If Allah stops us from doing the bad things only, then Allah might as well have just created just Malaa'ikah. So we are given a complete opportunity. Allah allows us to do the bad because of our choice. Allah gives the effect to the actions. You want to stab a person, I'm using that a lot. Please don't think I've got a violent temperament that's hidden deep inside me. Or maybe I do. You want to stab a person, it's clearly wrong. It's something that Allah is displeased with. You're going to get punished. You know, and Allah has warned us, you're going to be punished. The fact that you stab the person, your ability to stab doesn't come from you. That power to move your hand from this point to the next point where the stabbing occurs, every movement of that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It waits on the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you stab, Allah gives effect to your decision to stab. But don't confuse that Allah commits the bad. Allah gives you the opportunity to execute your choice. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His wisdom, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything, past, present, and future, is totally unrelated and disconnected from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of time. So time doesn't apply to Allah. Allah therefore in His wisdom knows everything before it even happened. So there could be reasons why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does certain things, because Allah has knowledge of the future, which we don't have. So we will never know what Allah's intentions are or why Allah did. A question of why, when we ask why to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is a very impolite question. We should never ask. Allah does what Allah pleases to do, and Allah knows what we will never ever be able to know. So there are times when Allah will give effect, or generally Allah gives effect to you executing your actions. But there are times when Allah overrides your choice and prevents you from doing that. There are so many examples in each of our lives. I live in a street where if I pull out from the garage and I want to go onto the road, there's a wall, quite a high wall next to me. And I can't see oncoming traffic. So many times. And you can quote your own examples. So many times I'm pulling out and I brake instinctively without any reason. And whoops, there comes a car past me. Had I not braked instinctively, I would have knocked into the car. Now, how do you explain that Allah has made me do something that I was not even aware of, that was outside of my control? These things are difficult to explain. And we shouldn't even bother. Ons moet nie daar krap nie. You won't find answers there. If you want to find why Allah does this or that, sometimes Allah lets us know and gives us insight. Oh, that's why we didn't get it then, because there was benefit for us in the future. But generally speaking, we should be very careful when asking the question why. But to come back to the point, to summarize it then, is Allah gives us the choice. We are not able to create the effect or create the action on our own. Creating that action belongs to Allah. It never transfers from Allah to you. Why can we be so sure about that? Because when we spoke about the other group, the Qadariyah, what did they believe? Let's just remind one another quickly, because there are some people who are joining us for the first time. The Qadariyah believe, not the Qadariyah, the people, the followers of Sayyid Abdul Qadir Jailani, Qaddasallahu Sidna Aziz, not that. Those are the people who believe that Allah assigns them power and free will, and with that power, they can create their own effect. They believe Allah is standing one side after Allah has given them life and power and free will. Then they can do what they want as long as they account for their deeds. They believe they have the ability to create effect. That's the Qadariya group. We must, in understanding good and bad, not fall in the trap to believe like them, that Allah has given you permission to do that, now you have the ability to do. It's a very subtle point, and we shouldn't fall in that trap. But on the other hand, don't say because Allah gives you the ability to actually do the stabbing itself, that Allah commits the stabbing. The stabbing is committed by you through your choice, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above doing anything that is bad or unacceptable. Now, let me pause there for now and ask whether that point is clear, because it's a very, very important point that we must understand, because we fall in this trap. I fall in the trap at times when I think I have the ability, even though I can explain it maybe a bit better than some people, but I fall in that trap. But if we understand it correctly, it helps us to prevent it from happening till it becomes second nature, that we're always aware that the power always resides with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's just hear if there's any other views on this or comments at this stage.
I have a question with Salie.
Yes.
If one commits that sin of stabbing somebody, you made the choice, and then the ability comes from Allah for that stabbing to take effect. Now, a lot of the time, the excuse can be used, it was so uitgesit that I had to stab that person. It was ordained that I had to stab that person.
Yeah.
How do we then understand that?
You see, it's a pity you didn't, because we spent quite a lot of time on the different types of beliefs out there. And one of the beliefs is the belief of the Qadariya, the Jabariya. The Jabariya Jabr means compulsion. Now, compulsion, they believe they are compelled. It was ordained. And if Allah has ordained or decreed that something must happen, then nothing can ever stop it from happening. Are they wrong? No. They're 100% correct. They're 100% correct in that sense. But where they go wrong is they don't factor in that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them choice, and they have to account for how they've exercised their choice, along with the fact that Allah has the ability to decree or preordain certain things. So we can never say Allah has put it out like that. But if we take the same concept, that a person, he gets up in the morning, he's very healthy. He gets up, he's going to work, he leaves his home, he turns the corner and a car bumps him and he dies. He's on his way to work. Is that the decree of Allah, or is that his choice? In a case like that, now that it's already happened, you can say that was the decree of Allah. It was put out to be like that. That is now. So we always get confirmation, not always, or we sometimes get confirmation of what was the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. 100 people go to the supermarket, 2 people contract the virus, COVID-19. All 100 went to the supermarket, whatever they went for. Only 2 people get it. Can we say that's the decree of Allah? Yes. now you find out afterwards what the decree is. But you can't say, before you're going to do something, if it is the decree of Allah, it will happen. And I've heard people say that. If it's the decree of Allah, it will happen. If it's not the decree of Allah, then it won't happen. Therefore, I'm just going to do whatever I want to do. Allah's going to punish you. You're not exercising your free will and taking the precautions that you're supposed to take. That comes with it. So you have to look at it as a parcel of issues that are interconnected. And when we deal with these issues, we should never try and deal with it to take it too lightly. Ponder on these issues and Allah will give you. Allah has a relationship with you. Allah knows what you can and what you cannot understand. Allah knows what is in your heart and Allah knows what you want to do. And if you are sincere and you're making effort, then Allah will give you insight and understanding to what you are able to understand and what your heart can cope with. So yeah. Yes, Yunus.
So just on that point with Salie, for clarity's sake, I think for understanding is from your individual perspective, looking forward, we have the choice to initiate, or rather we have the choice to do going forward. And whatever has happened, looking back into the past, that has been ordained. Is that not a nice way of trying to get that balance?
Say that last part again.
Looking forward, in order you're planning to do something in the future, right? That is your choices. And looking back to the past, then we can say that was the decree. Just for safety's sake, in order to keep understanding of this.
You see, there's levels of understanding the decree. We're going to come to the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the next lesson. In fact, how should we understand qada and qadr? Predestination. What is predestined and what is not? That's actually the next lesson. So I don't want to go into deep to that, except to say, anything that you see around you now in the present, even in the present, could it have been there? Could it have happened without the will of Allah? No. Nothing could ever have happened if it was not the will of Allah. So what you see is the will of Allah. But not everything in your life can be assigned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as Allah having committed that. There are certain things that you see around you that has to do with your own life. Even your bad decisions requires Allah's permission. Huh? Yes? So even the bad things you see around you still requires Allah's permission, Allah's will. That's why we often use the saying, Insha'Allah, with the will of Allah. We must be careful how we use that, but that's not a topic for now. What we must get in our mind, whatever happens in creation, good or bad, whatever we see in front of us, both past, present, and future, could only have happened if it was the will of Allah, because nothing happens outside the will of Allah. So you don't have to wait till tomorrow. You wait till tomorrow to find out. You wait for tomorrow to find out whether Allah has given effect to your choice, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just see what else I've got here.
Assalamu alaikum, Tamani.
Wa alaikum salam. Yes.
Ik kan ik nog iets zeggen, Nala? Wat
Yes.
nou die mijn mind gegaan is?
Yes.
Ik denk dat ik kan, als een baba geboren wordt, dan van die fitra. En dan denk ik ook van, Allah created you and your actions. Wat Tamani ook van gepraat. So,
Yes. Yeah. These things are obviously all interrelated, and you can't separate that. But if I take Auntie Amina's point now, if Allah created us to do good and bad, and there wasn't guidance given to us on the good or the bad, then we would have had a very tough time on this earth. We would have had to experiment of what is right and what is wrong. But Allah in His infinite mercy gave us the option between good and bad, but gave us clear guidance on the Quran and Sunnah, and even a practical human example of how to live the Quran. And then Allah created on the other side the other forces of distraction, like the nafs, shaitan, the dunya, and people on this side, and placed in between. But just to touch on the fitrah, the inbuilt inner goodness that every single human being has. I made this point and I'm emphasizing it, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created human beings, they were given the question of choice, trust. We're talking about before we were even born, when we were in the state of our ruhs were all assembled, of the entire human population that would ever exist, were all brought together. Muslim, non-Muslim, sinners, and whoever else were all brought together in one place. That was the time when Allah presented them with the opportunity to accept or to reject free will and choice. We're all familiar with what happened. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked them, am I your Rabb? And they acknowledged, all human beings, regardless of who they were, acknowledged that Allah is our Rabb. But what else happened at that time? I mentioned, at that time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His infinite mercy, subhanallah, Allah is so great. Allah! Allah is so great. Allah, Ya Rabb. Allah taught us all, every single person. Allah taught us His names. Now, when people interpret that to mean the names because it's referred to as the names. Allah directly, not even via the Malaa'ikah, Allah taught us the names directly, so that we could know things around us. That's the general interpretation. We were given knowledge. But the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us, over and above that understanding, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us knowledge of His divine names. What does that mean? That means that every single human being, Muslim, non-Muslim, sinner, or whatever nation, nationality, culture, language, whatever, everyone was given that knowledge. So we were all had that inner, inbuilt, inherent goodness planted in the heart of the hearts, the sir of the sir. What Sayyid Abdul Qadir Jailani speaks about in one of his books, Secret of the Secrets. We speak about the heart of a human being. Now, within the heart of a human being, the spiritual heart, we're not talking about the physical heart, there is a secret center within the heart, which is referred to as the secret of the secrets. That secret of the secrets that's within every single human being contains true knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is what we are striving to uncover and remove all the veils around our hearts, so that we can get to that inner pure, true knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we talk about the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have managed to remove the rust, the darkness, the veils, the ignorance from their hearts, where that true knowledge is shining through, and that true knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes them of the group that's referred to as the knowers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So part of our journey, the objective of our journey is, as we said earlier on, worship Allah, yes. That's at the general level for the average person. But for the people who are serious about wanting to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the path is getting to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why we are dealing with what sounds like technical things. Why should we know who creates the effect? Shouldn't we just believe like we believe and say we believe firmly? You can believe firmly incorrectly. You can be sincerely incorrect. Let us not fall in that trap by claiming to be sincere and thinking that that is enough. There's an obligation on us to seek knowledge so that what we know is the truth. And if we are unclear and we have doubts, we must seek answers to those things. And it's not going to come to sit in one Zoom session. It's going to make effort to find more knowledge that supports these things. And the basis of getting to that knowledge, that inner knowledge that's kept in the secret of the secrets, the foundation of that knowledge is Tawhid. Knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you're not going to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you say that you can create effect. And Allah can also create effect. For example, or it can't happen outside the will of Allah, so I can do what I will. You don't understand Allah properly. You're assigning things to yourself or assigning things to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is not correct. The Amina triggered a question that was maybe not exactly where we were on the topic, but maybe the point that we made with respect to the question was extremely useful. So let me just see what else I have to say about okay, let me remind people just let me just remind you, is it, yeah, you see, I struggle with the technology because of my age. The last part, I think the ability to act comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Never forget that. And the choice comes from Allah. But Allah does not engage in evil, and Allah does not commit the evil. He creates the conditions and the circumstances and the opportunity. But having given us the opportunity to execute it, it still waits on the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before it can happen. I think these 2 points we made earlier. Allah is the only creator about anything and everything. Simple. Anything that exists, there can't be another creator. Allah created even shaitan. If you want to know, can Allah create bad? Who created Shaitan? Did Shaitan create himself? So there's only one creator. Allah created Shaitan for a particular reason. And part of the reason was that he should be one of those temptations for us that will make it difficult for us, because this path is not an easy path to always do the right thing. And just remember, never use Shaitan as an excuse. Shaitan forced me to do that. I had people say that many times. Shaitan forced me. I couldn't help it, man. Shaitan forced me to do this. Shaitan cannot force you to do anything. Shaitan can only whisper in your ear. He whispers and he says to you, why don't you rather do that? And this is a good excuse and all of that. Then you take it on as your own thing and then you act. And Shaitan on the day of Qiyamah, when people want to blame Shaitan, Shaitan will say, no, Allah, you know, you created me. I never had the ability to force them. They chose to do those things themselves. So bad was equally created along with good. Of course, we must go and account for our actions. That is the thing. You're going to stand there in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and your deeds are going to be weighed. Oh, Ya Allah, protect us, make it easy for us to pass this test. We look at ourselves, we might be going to the masjid regularly, maybe performing our salah on time and doing all of that. But many of us fall very short when it comes to our relationship with people. That would be one of the extremely difficult tests to pass. May Allah make it easy for us, inshallah. Okay, I think I've basically covered everything. The only point I wish to make in conclusion is to say that knowledge is a sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and knowledge is the path that we have to walk on to get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and experience His love. And as the Arifin, the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, you must taste the knowledge. Because we make this terrible mistake to say, we can know, and when we say know, knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can never be with the mind. Yes, the mind helps to take us to the door, but the mind cannot walk through the door of the unseen. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unseen. So the mind has a limitation, and the vehicle with which you must get to know and experience Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with your spiritual heart. That is the entity and nothing else. So purifying the heart is a difficult topic, but it's actually a very simple topic. If I must put it down in one or two phrases, look at your relationship not only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, look at your relationship to the people that you come into contact with, and start with your own family. There you will find lots of answers and means to remove all that dirt and that filth out of your heart. If you correct your relationship at the level of the people, then automatically you will find it easier to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove the veils of darkness and ignorance and heedlessness and disobedience. Remove those veils, make it easier for Allah, because Ya Allah, we in our weak way, we are saying to you, Ya Allah, we want to get closer to you. Show us, help us, we can't do it on our own. Help us, Ya Allah, so that we can know what is the right route for us, and for each person it will obviously be different. But Allah is the one who understands everyone's needs, and Allah is the only one who can respond to all our various things. So I'm concluding on that good and bad comes from Allah, but Allah creates the conditions and circumstances, but Allah is not involved in committing evil and sin and bad deeds. We have to account for it. Let me hear if there are any final comments before we ask Imam Hussein to make dua for us. It might sound simple now, but I want you all to reflect on what we've just covered today, so that when this topic of good and bad comes from Allah, you are able to explain it in a way that does justice to Allah, and you don't claim anything for yourself that doesn't belong to you. And one of the ways to find out whether you know it, go and explain it to somebody at home. See if you are able to explain it clearly, and then you will find that you do understand or you don't understand. And if you don't understand, bring it back here and we can see if we can help one another. Because in this participatory way, we are using not only the views of the people who are making their comments, but we are using the barakah and the nur of the hearts of the people. And maybe inshallah, we can assist one another in that way. Are there any final comments or questions? If not, then let me say, oh ya Allah, I you know, when I started writing on these issues, yeah, he's still here. Let me just say, when I started on these issues, I wanted to avoid the topic of predestination, because it is such a difficult topic. But then I realized it's part of the arkans of Iman. How do I believe properly if I don't understand this in the correct manner? So the next topic that we are going to be talking about is the question of predestination. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for us to understand and to develop a way. I'm going to say and plead with everyone, make a special effort just to be part of this part of these meetings that we've been having, so that you can understand this issue properly. It's going to crop up throughout your life, and you will never have all the answers. No one has all the answers, because this is a topic that is very, very difficult and subtle, and you can go wrong, and your aqidah can be compromised. Your whole belief system can be compromised if you believe incorrectly. So make a special effort to be part of the next classes that we're going to have on this issue. Imam Hussein, I don't think anyone wishes to make any further comment at this stage.
That's fine.
Imam Hussein, can you make dua for us, please? Or do you want to make a final comment?
No comments. Waiting for the next lesson, inshallah.
Inshallah. Wednesday, Sunday at 2:30, inshallah.
Of course, too, yeah. Okay.
Tafadal.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil mursaleen. Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqa warzuqna ittiba'a wa arina al-batila batila warzuqna ijtinaba. Allahumma ij'alna min alladhina yastami'una al-qawla fayattabi'una ahsana. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم واهدنا ووفقنا للحق وإلى طريق المستقيم بسر سورة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا
صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت وسلمت وباركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Shukran.
Yeah, shukran, Imam Hussein. I just want to say to the new people who joined us today, if you want copies of this particular book that we are using, from which we are speaking on, it's you can go to the website salimani.co.za. All the books are available there. It will be book 3, The Essentials of Tawhid. And if and when you are in Cape Town or when the lockdown allows, I've got a set of all 6 books that I will make available to you. You must just let me know, inshallah. You can take my phone number for those of you who don't have it. 079 019 5551. And you can send me a WhatsApp and we can see how we can take it from there. Shukran very much for joining us, and I hope you will be able to join us on Sunday at 2:30, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam. Muhammad Fasih.
Salam kaya.
Wa alaikum salam. What are we? I'm going to phone you on. Oh, you don't have yourself.
I'm going to log out. Or can I ask the Salie just to re-add me quickly? I'm going to log out and the Salie can just re-add me on.
Okay. Yes, inshallah. Shukran. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Muhammad Fasih, but I can't do that because it's going to record.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so just in terms of tonight, inshallah, is Brother Salie available? 8 o'clock?
Yes,
inshallah?
yes, I am available. Alhamdulillah.
Okay.
What time? 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock.
Inshallah. Shukran. Look forward to seeing you and hearing from you. Habibi. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everyone.
Wa alaikum salam.